Hello. In the previous video, I showed you how to do a 10-step value scale using clear, distinct values from one block to the next. For this next one, it's a little bit more challenging as a gradual value scale. So with a gradual value scale, the transition still happens from light to dark, but it should happen slowly and steadily in a smooth process where you don't see any noticeable lines or edges as you go along. So you just have to basically build it up very gradually. The process, however, is more or less the same in that you're going to start out with your 2H pencil and you're going to start adding in layers and building it up gradually and slowly as you work your way down. The one thing that will change is that instead of just using the 2H pencil from here to here, I'm going to start it somewhere in this area, and I'm going to go all the way to the end. And with each new layer that I add with each pencil, it's going to always go all the way to the end, okay? So I'm going to show you how I start this out because how you start it is really important. And then I will time-lapse the rest of it as I go down to the end because that part is pretty consistent with what we did up here. So you don't want a noticeable line. So in order to avoid that, you have to stagger and break up the start, and you have to be very careful about pressure. So as I start, I'm just going to sort of jump around. I'm going to barely let the end of the pencil touch the paper. And you notice that I'm not starting here. I'm sort of kind of in the middle of the white box. That's because I want to fade from the white into this 2H value very carefully and very slowly. So I'm kind of jumping around a bit. I'm kind of skipping some places, and I'm being a little inconsistent at first because I want it to make it difficult to tell exactly where I started. That's the goal. But as I start moving to the left, I'm going to start to be more and more consistent and more even. Notice that I am still, regardless of how I do this, I'm still picking one direction and I'm sticking with it. So I'm going with this diagonal direction through the surface. So now that I've gotten a ways along on here, I'm going to start being more consistent so that I apply the rest of this layer in a consistent, even way without missing any spots all the way through to the end of the box. Okay, so I've done my first layer all the way to the end of the box. You notice that it's very light. There's very little value applied. That's just because it's a single layer with a 2H pencil. So I don't want it to get too dark too fast. I want it to be very subtle. Also notice that it's hard to tell where exactly it starts in here. It sort of fades in, and that's what you want. So I started approximately right in here in the middle of this box. Now, I'm going to start another layer, and I'm going to start it roughly right in here, but I'm going to do the same thing that I did when I started this first layer, which is to stagger and break up the start of it so that I don't see a noticeable edge. The other thing I'm going to do differently is I'm going to change my direction. Since I went in a diagonal direction this way the first time, I'm going to go in a diagonal direction this way in order to even out the texture on the surface as I go along. Okay, so now that's two layers. Now, when doing a gradual blending value scale, it takes a large number of layers to really get to where it needs to be. So you're going to notice that I'll be doing more layers than I did with the layers in here. I'm just going to do the rest of the layers with the 2H pencil that I'm going to do before moving on to the other pencils. Also, keep in mind that I'm again, changing directions every single time I add a new layer. So diagonal this way, left to right, up and down, and any other kind of diagonal layers in between. Always change directions. If you keep repeating the same direction over and over and over again, it's just going to reinforce that texture and make it very apparent on the surface. Your goal with gradual blending is for it to look as smooth as possible. Okay, so that was a few more layers added in, and now I'm feeling like I'm getting to the upper limit of the value that the 2H pencil can achieve. So now I'm going to switch to HB, but everything else about the process is going to stay the same. I'm just continuing to add more layers in different directions and moving slowly down the line as I go. So as with the 2H, I think I've reached the upper limit of this HB pencil, so now I'm going to switch to the 2B, but going to keep on going. And finally, I'm going to switch to the General's Layout pencil to finish this up. Okay, so now I've gotten my value scale, but just like with the 10 step, the blending stump is a good way of sort of smoothing this out, evening out, maybe darken some places. And I might, after doing this with the blending tool, go in and fine tune here and there if I feel like any of the values are not quite where I need them to be, but we'll see after I get through this process. Okay, so got a few little uneven places here and there, so I'm just going to go back in and touch up with the pencil and see if I can smooth it out just a little bit more, but we're getting pretty close. And the last step is just to go back in with my eraser and clean up around the edges just to finish it up. Okay, there we have it, a gradual blending value scale. So if this is successful and done the right way, you shouldn't see any noticeable edges or lines in the values. It should be fairly smooth and consistent as it moves across from light to dark as it works toward the end. If you're successful, then that's the way it should look. Thanks.